that they will be working very closely with the administration.
Well,
trying to get there.
I guess what I'm asking is this seems like a gargantuan task ahead, and with your agency with very few resources at its disposal now, is the president going to have to increase the deficit to pay for this? Is he going to have to raise taxes? Is he shut down some other programs in order to get money to take care of this relief? What do you envision at this point?
Well, it's difficult for me to tell you where they will take that money from. I do not know. Right now, we have enough money to respond to the needs that we are meeting right now. As we get into the disaster and as the water goes down, then we will make sure that we give the exact dollar figure that we can come up with to the White House and OMB.
What are you doing right now?
We are working with the states and local officials in getting damage assessments for individual needs right now.
So at this point, you haven't done anything. You're just trying to find out how extensive the damage is. Would that be?
Of course, we are there coordinating relief efforts with the American Red Cross, the Corps of Engineers, Department of Agriculture, and the other federal agencies that have been responding.
Dr. Friday, let me turn back to you. Is this just the beginning? Some people say this may be just the beginning of a cycle, that we haven't seen the worst of this summer yet.
Well, clearly the summer is not yet over, but in the Washington area, for example, the peak temperature average is reached around the end of August. So if we see a cooling by the end of this week, we're approaching the peak of the summer, and then we can see a tailing off of that. The problem with the flooding was pointed out early on in the show. It's almost of biblical proportions. That may be a little exaggerated, but it's certainly unprecedented.
The anchorman's allowed a little leeway here.
It's certainly unprecedented in our recorded history. We've been recording that history now for about 150 years on the Mississippi. The flooding, though, occurs in two areas. It occurs not only in the river flooding that you see there, but it also occurs from pooling in the farmlands, so that many of the crops and farms are literally underwater now. Not much water, not enough to cause threat to life, but certainly enough to adversely affect the agricultural production itself. Second phase of that is that the Mississippi itself serves as a major conduit for our transportation. Between 2/3 and 3/4 of all the agricultural exports in this country go down the Mississippi. And with the waters as high as they are now, the Mississippi is closed to barge traffic over a fair amount of that middle region. So it's going to take at least 2 weeks before that is opened. So as far as the rest of the summer is concerned, we're going to see the aftermath of the flood situation. And there's a possibility that that flooding on the main rivers may go on until as late as mid to late August.
Now, there's some talk also that we may see more hurricanes than normal this year.
Our best forecasters right now that have been studying the climatic averages, Dr. William Gray from Colorado, is predicting an average season for hurricanes. But that's a very important point you raise. The lower Mississippi, we should not expect to see major flooding on that down past Cape Girardeau and Cairo, Illinois, where the Ohio comes into that river. But there's enough water in the system that were we to have a tropical storm come up through the lower Mississippi area, then we could have very serious flooding on the lower Mississippi as well. But we do not see a larger than number of hurricanes this season.
Let me go back to you, Mr. Witt, because as you well know, you're taking over an agency that has been roundly denounced by almost everyone. It's been called everything from a dumping ground for political hacks to, I think, Senator Hollings at one point said it was the biggest bunch of bureaucratic jackasses that he'd ever tried to work with. This was after Hurricane Hugo. How bad is it over there? I mean, how much of a job do you have just to get the thing organized to where it can deal with some of this stuff?
We're working on redefining the mission of FEMA plus reorganization of FEMA. But we're responding better now than we have in the past because we have learned a lot of lessons from the past disasters. And of course, every time you have a disaster, you learn something from that disaster. So what we're trying to do is to be more proactive, be out front, be there to support that state, give them technical assistance. And this is what President Clinton wants. He wants us out there in front to make sure that we're there to help that disaster victim or to help the local governments when they need it.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming by. When we come back, we'll talk to U.S. Senator Barbara Mikulski, who says that FEMA has a lot of work to do on itself before it's really ready to handle disasters. In a minute.
This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world.
At first, it doesn't seem to be much of a problem. A tire here, a tire there. But it all adds up to the point where Americans dispose of more than 250 million tires a year. But at the Archer Daniels Midland Company, we're doing something about it. We're taking tires that would ordinarily be an environmental problem. We're shredding them and mixing them with coal to create a fuel that burns cleaner in our power plant, providing the energy we need to produce ethanol, a gasoline additive derived from surplus cornstarch that helps reduce carbon monoxide emissions by up to 25%. So as you can see, by using a little ingenuity, we at ADM have got yet another good idea rolling. ADM, supermarket to the world.
And joining us now, Senator Barbara Mikulski from her office in Baltimore. Senator Mikulski's subcommittee in Congress oversees the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Senator Mikulski, let me just ask you flat out, is that agency and is this government prepared to handle what it's going to have to do as a result of these floods?
I think that the jury is still out to see if the new FEMA will be able to respond in an aggressive way to help those communities recover. As you know, under the old FEMA, under George Bush and Ronald Reagan, they were slow to respond to help communities recover. They were too busy sitting on their guidelines, too much bureaucratic confusion, and now we'll see if the new FEMA is able to get out there and help those communities respond by setting up homes, restoration of public infrastructure, and also helping the communities rebuild.
Well, are
themselves.
they actually set up in a way that they can handle this? I mean, have they at this point done what needs to be done in order to give the help?
I believe that Mr. Witt and President Clinton have been absolutely on the job because, unlike other disasters, they're acting in an active way rather than in a passive way. But under the law, they're severely limited. The old FEMA is still functioning under a Cold War framework, which is more money goes into preparing for nuclear war than for the disasters ordinary Americans in our communities are going to face. That's why I've introduced legislation, Bob, to bring down the wall between the civil defense secret stuff as well as the programs that affect ordinary people. Get rid of the political hacks, make it an all-hazards agency, and get it ready for what the 21st century means, ready for natural disasters.
Let's give just a note of explanation here because a lot of people don't follow this as closely as you do, Senator. When you're saying they were preparing for nuclear war, this agency's main mission in the past, it seems, has been to prepare evacuation routes and civil defense actions in case this country should be struck by a nuclear weapon. Critics such as yourself has said it should have spent more of its time and money and planning toward how to handle disasters like floods and other things that occur here. Now, you have introduced legislation. What do you want to do to change this agency?
What I want to do is bring down the firewall between the old civil defense stuff, which was never used and will never be used, and make FEMA an all-hazards agency based on the risk that communities in the United States of America will face. Communities are more vulnerable to hurricanes, to flooding, and to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions than into nuclear war. I also want to professionalize the agency and get rid of all the excessive political appointees they have, and then go for an all-hazards approach, meaning that in every state in the United States of America, we're ready for any hazard that hits it, and that we're ready to respond and to back up those governors, the National Guard, and the Red Cross the way they ought to be.
Senator, where is the government going to get the money to pay for this disaster relief? Mr. Witt said, well, they're trying to draw up a plan now, but he couldn't even give us a ballpark estimate about how much money is going to be needed. How much money do you think is going to be needed, and where should it come from?
Well, the damage assessment will be done. FEMA really will come in. FEMA's activity will escalate as the water subsides. The money will come from those programs where we've insured against it. First of all, from flood insurance. Second, from crop insurance. And then the other will be through the SBA loan program. And then we'll come in, if necessary, with a supplemental reprogramming.
Well, excuse me, but it's my understanding that the flood insurance program is already $18 million in debt. They don't have any money there, do they? Am I wrong about
Bob,
that?
That's just a cash shortfall. The flood insurance takes in $55 million a month, and we'll be able to cover the damages under flood insurance. Then there's also the crop insurance program. There will be SBA loans where people lend the community money, and then there will be the restoration of public infrastructure, and that's where the FEMA bucks will come in, and if necessary, we'll reprogram from other areas. But to operate FEMA, we've got the money in the Cold War area. That's why I want to bring down the firewall and start spending money on bomb shelters and spend money on providing the shelters for the people of Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa. And we're with them.
Should the government pressure people to buy flood insurance, Senator McCoskey?
I believe that if you live in a floodplain, you should buy flood insurance. Just like if I drive a car, I ought to have automobile insurance. If you're at risk, there should be insurance.
So it should be a requirement?
I believe it should.
Now, let me ask you, there's another question here, and that is in communities like Davenport, Iowa, which declined to build flood levees and take other actions. Should they get the same kind of relief as other communities down the Mississippi who spent their local funds to take flood relief actions? How do you feel about that?
Well, I believe that when we do this is why I'm going to reorganize FEMA, which is that under the law, they would have had to build those levees to then qualify for certain types of disaster relief. But right now, I don't want to quibble with what we should and what we shouldn't do. That comes under what the new FEMA should be like. Right now, I want the United States government backing President Clinton to help restore what is needed to save lives, save jobs, and save communities in that area. Then we'll worry about all the what shoulds afterwards.
Senator McCoskey, thank you very much. We're going to leave it there. We're going to talk next with a couple of political pundits here in Washington about all of this and the rest of the week's news. In a minute.
It was pouring rain. I was late. The guy from Xerox was waiting to talk about my documents. My documents, I asked. Add impact to your direct mail, he says. Just add color. You can get 25% more responses. More responses, I say? And I see how color gets my documents to make money. I say call my direct mail anything you want. If you're helping my cash flow, you're talking my language.
See your documents differently. Call 1-800-ASK-XEROX, the document company.
At the Laporte Vineyards, owners Victor and Beth Laporte knew varietal grapes, but profit sharing and pension plans they knew little about. So they turned to someone who gave their financial needs the same care they accorded their wine, Dean Witter.
Where we invest is in the individual. What we invest is our time, our expertise, and our care.
So the Laportes can now not only enjoy success, they can taste it. Dean Witter.
We measure success one investor at a time.
But I could not believe it when I ate it. It was just, they're just absolutely wonderful.
I've learned to like them quite a bit. We take them home and eat them pretty regularly.
They were really delicious. I like them. They're just good. Oh, they get a 10 for sure.
They're talking about it in the Midwest.
It's quick. I know it's nutritious. It's going to be good for me.
Bob has a high cholesterol problem, so they really solve a lot of problems for our whole family.
And soon it may be on the lips of people everywhere.
If he says it's good, it is really good.
Yeah, I like them.
It's the Midland Harvest brand Harvest Burger, an all-vegetable patty from the Archer Daniels Midland Company. Harvest Burgers are low in fat, low in calories, free of cholesterol, and contain dietary fiber. Qualities that are in growing demand by today's health-conscious consumers. And what are people saying about the taste? We couldn't have said it better ourselves. ADM, supermarket to the world.
The blistering heat wave on the East Coast and its health hazards, and the non-stop rains in the Midwest. Tomorrow on CBS This Morning with Harry Smith live from the flood area and Paula Zahn.
With us now, a semi-regular on this program, Alan Murray, who just this week was promoted to Washington Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal. Congratulations, Alan.
Thank you.
And the Republican analyst, strategist, commentator, consultant, Ed Rollins, also a frequent visitor here. Gentlemen, let me ask you about the flood. I can recall in years past some mayors who got beat in the next election because the snowplows didn't work and they didn't get the snow cleared. Does something like this flood on the Mississippi present a political problem for President Clinton?
Well, I think you certainly have to wonder whether the president shouldn't spend his time this week in Hannibal, Missouri, instead of in Hawaii.
Well, he did go out before he went to Japan.
But the attention is there. Attention is there now, and it's not clear whether he may cut his vacation short and go.
Should he, Ed?
He absolutely has to have a presence there. Certainly the vice president's going out tomorrow, but I think it's even more important for him to be out there sometime this week, particularly as people start to see how severe the damage is.
So floods can not only be a serious problem for the country, they can be a political problem.
Particularly following, I think the president had a good week last week in the foreign policy arena. I think Americans today are far more interested, though, on the domestic side. And handling disasters people view that as a part of a presidential role, whether it should be or not. So I think it's critical for him to really show that they're in charge.
If Ross Perot shows up there, he will certainly regret not being there.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Japan. Let's don't completely gloss that over. The White House is making a great, saying this is a great trade breakthrough. They're saying the president really brought this thing under control. He was a dominant figure. What do you think, Alan?
Well, these economic summits are always surrounded by a lot of hype. This one was they take place in these grand settings. This was the Akasaka Palace. They've had them at Versailles. They've had them at Rambouillet. There are thousands of officials. There are tens of thousands of reporters. And in the end, they usually produce a mouse, not an elephant. This time, the president said going in, expect a mouse, and he came up with something slightly bigger. Maybe it's a hamster or a rabbit or something. It's significant, it's important, but it's not nearly the huge breakthrough that they are claiming it is.
You're speaking, of course, of this framework for trade with Japan.
Really three accomplishments. They made some progress on the global trade talks, which is important. They put together a package of aid for Russian industry, not nearly as big as the president wanted, but it's still there. And they set this framework for new talks between the U.S. and Japan.
What's your read on it?
It was a good week for the president. It really was a week of image, though, I think, as opposed to really a week of substance. And they used a little bit of substance here and there to create a very positive, very presidential image. And I certainly saw Dave Gergen's influence in all of this. But the president
being called Gergen's lotion.
Well, the bottom line is the president did perform well. And I think it was a very important trip for him in the sense that other foreign leaders saw him perform well. Tokyo is a very unusual place. It loves rock stars. It loved Madonna. It loved Michael Jackson, even Mike Tyson when he went there. And I think to a certain extent, the president fit into that and attracted a lot of attention. But I'm not sure 6 months from now, this economic summit will have accomplished a whole lot, and that's the test that's really had.
One thing's for sure, 6 months from now, people are going to remember that this was the week that they started trying to reconcile the House and Senate versions of the budget agreement. Whether they'll remember that or not, they'll certainly remember if indeed the president and the Congress raise taxes this week, which would be the bottom line of these negotiations that are going on. Senator Dole said this week he thought the Republicans might beat the president's budget package. Would that be a good thing if the Republicans did that, Ed Rollins?
Well, I think to a certain extent this is a very bad package, and I think Republicans have focused the attention that it really is a tax package, and there really isn't any freeze, there really isn't any significant budget cuts, which I think is what the American public wants. Republicans aren't going to vote for it. They made that very clear in the first two votes. Democrats have got a lot of negotiation to pull a package together that they can get sufficient votes. But it's kind of a tragic for a president who has big majorities in the House and certainly a majority in the Senate, that he wins by one vote in the Senate vote and 6 in the House, and he still has tougher negotiations to go.
Well, I can see tears in your eyes there. Your eyes beginning to cloud up.
Well, Bill Clinton has convinced Republicans what they're all about. They're not what he's for, and I think that's a very important first step.
Is it going to happen? Will there be a budget agreement? Is the president going to get this?
I think it will. It's not going to be easy, but I think it will happen. I think Senator Dole's probably engaging in some wishful thinking. What they have to do is take the bill that passed the Senate, and they have to give something like $20 to $30 billion worth of concessions to various groups in order to make it capable of passing the House, and then they have to raise that 20 to 30 billion, either by increasing the gas tax, possibly putting a tax on utility bills, or looking for other ways to pay for it.
One other thing that's going to come up this week, this is the week that the president told the Joint Chiefs of Staff he wanted their recommendation on what to do about gays in the military. How do you all see this shaking down?
This is the kind of issue that must make presidents feel much happier to be overseas than to be back at home, because my understanding is he's going to be presented with 3 options this week, all of which are variants of this don't ask, don't tell formulation. But
none of which is a winner. He's either going to alienate the military or he's going to alienate the gay community, possibly go against his own principles.
Quickly, Ed.
He's already lost on this issue. He lost the day that he moved it forward in the first week of the agenda. American public today sees this as more important than a lot of other things to this president, not necessarily to them, and I think he loses long-term politically.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We have to leave it there. We will hear from Charles Carroll, who will be doing the CBS Sunday Night News this week, and he will have the latest on the flood. That's it for us here on Face the Nation. We'll see you next week.
There I was, buried in forms. There she was from Xerox calling them documents. Documents? What are you talking about, I say? Store all these electronically, she says. All those files, those warehouses, get rid of them. And I seal. Electronic storage. Cutting my costs. I say, yeah, when you're talking about my documents, you're talking about my profits. Exactly, she says.
See your documents differently. Call 1-800-ASK-XEROX, the document company.
Most people retire to Northern California for the gentle climate. Neil McBain came here to race in the fabled Monterey Historic. And Dean Witter was with him every mile of the way.
Respect the power of a client's dream and help them achieve it.
That's why 11 years ago, Dean Witter mapped out Neil's financial course with one goal in mind. Victory. Dean Witter.
We measure success one investor at a time.
This portion of Face the Nation was sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world, and by Dean Witter. There are many ways to measure success. Dean Witter measures success one investor at a time. This broadcast was produced by CBS News, which is solely responsible for the selection of today's guests and topics. It originated in Washington, D.C.
Experience CBS News.
Hey, wait a minute. If Uncle Sam is supposed to protect you from illegal gun dealers, why is he acting like your new best friend? Eye on America on the CBS Evening News tomorrow.
This is CBS.
If you're like me, when you get up in the morning, you want a strong cup of coffee. I want a headache.
Representatives. California can muster 52. Now, you can imagine what might happen if California decided to launch its long-promised Great Northwest Water Raid. What Oregon has going for it in Congress is seniority, which freshman Representative First freely admits she lacks. She says it's the downside of term limitations, and I've favored it in the past. Experience is undeniably the last best teacher of the facts of life, and the best thing about the system is the ability to change your mind and, as it pleases you, throw the rascals out just as often as you like. You can't guarantee that with term limits. I'm Rick Myers.
If you would like to respond to this editorial, write feedback, KATU, Post Office Box 2, Portland, Oregon, 97207.